joining us today for 2026 DSHS National Library Week. You're participating in the Grant Readiness Moving Beyond Eligibility to Capacity webinar. This is the only webinar of Library Week that's open. We're glad to have all of you here today. First, let me share a disclaimer. Today's content is for educational and informational purposes only. The URLs I share are not official endorsements, just resources that you may want to explore. I can't guarantee you'll receive grants from DSHS or any other funder based upon participation in the webinar. However, we wouldn't offer this if we didn't think it would help to get you on the right track to being successful with grants. Today, we'll cover three main ideas: that strong systems are more important than good writing, that funders don't care about your needs, and that practice creates confidence. The grant process is not so simple as find an opportunity, apply, and receive a grant award. It's much more complex. Today, we're going to talk about how to create a solid foundation that makes the process easier and more fruitful. Okay, here's our first big idea, that strong systems are more important than good writing. Although grant writing is what tends to get all the attention, it's not the first stage. No grant reviewer is going to look at your proposal and say, wow, what great sentence structure. Instead, they're going to try to decide if they believe that you understand the community need that your program addresses, and if they can trust you to deliver results. Taking the time to build strong internal systems helps you craft stronger proposals, which creates grant funding that's both more reliable and sustainable. I bet if I asked you to raise your hand if you're feeling more pressure than usual about grant seeking right now, everyone would have their hand up. And you're not imagining it. Whether you're in the private or the public sector, the heat is on. There's more competition for all types of grant funding, shorter application windows, and increased prioritization of eligibility and compliance. Evolving funder priorities are also making things more challenging. They may have narrowed their scope, reduced the number of awards they're giving, or even put a pause on funding. You must keep your ear to the ground and be aware of any changes so you're ready to respond when you see the right opportunity. At the same time, funders may also be expecting more from you regarding clear-cut alignment and measurable outcomes for potentially smaller awards. I know that sounds pretty grim, right? But don't lose hope. Today, we're going to focus on how to get your house in order to better your chances of being successful in today's grant environment. It's now taking more than just a good proposal to stand out from the pack. You must do your homework and be ready to demonstrate that you're the community partner they're seeking. There's a tangible value exchange in grant seeking. The funder, of course, has the money and they set the rules that we have to abide by. But you also have advantages to bring to the table. You have proximity to the community need, expertise in implementing successful programs, the infrastructure and ability to get results through strong internal systems, and a commitment, now more than ever, to building relationships with funders versus just seeing them as walking ATMs. But what comes to mind when you think about the word capacity? Most people equate it with staffing, but capacity is much more than just a head count. Grants are a double-edged sword. Although they can spark rapid growth and allow you to expand further into the community, they also are going to reveal weaknesses in your internal systems. So I want you to think about this during the course of the webinar today. If you received a grant big enough to double or even triple your current reach, what would you need to change now to make the most of it? The processes, tools, and workflows you need to create that internal capacity are going to fall into three main pillars: leadership and governance, financial management, and program accountability. And we're going to talk more about those in just a moment. Are there any processes at your organization that exist mostly in someone's head, on that Word document that you're always meaning to complete, or in a spreadsheet on your desktop that no one else has access to? Knowledge that isn't documented is going to have to be created from scratch later, and it's just not sustainable to recreate the wheel with every grant proposal that you sit down to write. There are many benefits to creating and maintaining something called a grant content library. And as you build your library, you're collecting reusable assets that strengthen every future grant opportunity. You're collecting information that's commonly requested in grant applications. So pulling this information together and saving it helps you get out of crisis mode, improves your efficiency, and is a good starting point to adapt to each funder's specific request. It's so much easier to build on something solid than starting with a blank page. In your library, you're able to keep all of your documents in a central location, preferably digital, that your grant team can access and continue to update with the most recent documents. So this is a living library that you're always working on and updating. Overall, your grant content library is going to protect what your team knows. It's going to help you guard against staff transitions, reorganizations, and program changes. Let's now go back to those 3 pillars of capacity so you can determine what you need to collect for your library. So leadership and governance is the first pillar of capacity, demonstrating that you're a compelling and relevant organization. Your mission and vision statements help show alignment between your organization and a potential funding source. Your history as a trusted provider in your community includes an organizational capacity statement and a strategic plan that indicates how you're going to keep all of these programs thriving beyond specific grant awards. And if you're a nonprofit, you should also collect copies of your 501c3 tax exempt letter, your articles of incorporation, and your bylaws. Brief bios of your leadership team demonstrate that you've assembled a strong, credentialed executive team with no significant changes. So you've got stability in your leadership. And specifically for nonprofits, you need to show that you have a board of directors comprised of individuals from diverse backgrounds that reflect the community that you're serving. A current copy of your organizational chart shows that you have an adequate staffing structure to carry out your work. The overall items in this first pillar are typically attachments, and having them all in one place ready to go is going to save you a lot of time. The second pillar of capacity concerns the financial management of your organization. Funders want compliant, low-risk grantees. They want to know that you're always thinking about risk and have financial management systems that your staff are trained on, understand, and abide by. Your agency-wide and program budgets are detailed and realistic, including multiple funding streams that demonstrate sustainability. And you set up extensive internal controls to support responsible financial and grant management activities, including written policies and procedures for all agency activities. Some examples include segregation of duties, and this is where no single person controls an entire financial transaction. Timely and accurate financial reporting for responsible money management, expenses that align with grant goals, and where you're using cost centers to keep those grant funds separate, and then also comparing budgeted versus actual expenses to make sure that you're not overspending during the performance period. Safeguarding assets. So if you happen to have purchased any equipment with grant funds, you need to be able to show how you're going to prevent damage or theft. And if you're using subrecipients or contractors to carry out a grant award, that you have oversight procedures to show how you're going to keep them compliant. Overall, it's important to have documentation of agency processes and copy and paste boilerplate language that you can just drop into new grant applications. If you're not sure where to start with setting up your own organizational controls, myfedtrainer.com has a free resource library with lots of checklists and templates. All you have to do is set up a free account and you'll have access to a lot of really good information. And the final pillar of capacity, program accountability, is your mission and action. And this is where you're going to save the most time in being ready for your next grant. You're going to have those program descriptions that help you match the program with the right grant opportunity, showing that you address an urgent community need that you've identified with data, that you understand and can reach the target population, and that you're not duplicating any other local programs. Plot out a logic model is a quick and easy way to show how your program works from start to finish. Many grant applications are now requiring both a written work plan and a logic model. You can also gather copy and paste descriptions of your monitoring and evaluation systems, including how you collect and analyze data and what you do with the results to improve your programs, showing that overall proof of impact. Data-driven organizations are always perceived as more fundable. And like your organizational leadership positions, you may be asked for job descriptions and brief bios of your key program staff and a list of any community partners that you're going to call on to help you succeed. And this could be partners that you have a simple referral relationship with, all the way to more formal partnerships where you've signed a memoranda of understanding. And finally, no funder wants to be your sole source of support. They want to know who else is supporting your program, so keep a list of any current and pending funding partners. All right, here's the last piece for your grant content library, a baseline proposal. This proposal isn't created for a specific funder. It's a framework of commonly requested items for private and public funding that lets you recycle existing work and adapt it for future opportunities. So you've got the table here with a list of all the different components and a quick description. So just at a high level, you want to make sure that your baseline proposal includes a summary of your program, along with your mission statement that you already have because you collected it for your grant content library, a brief description of that community need and your target population, a high-level timeline of major steps for your program, perhaps that logic model, what success looks like for your program recipients, and how you're going to use evaluation to recognize success. You're going to have your list of any key partners and a total one-year budget or price tag for your program. And this can be helpful if you're shopping your program out to several funders. You'll be able to know, well, here's 30% of my budget, or here's 50%, and it'll help you keep your cost constant across your request. This is likely pretty easy to pull together for an existing program, but if you're developing a new program, you could start with just a one-page overview version of what's in this table and build from there. All right, so that's our first big idea of the day. Let's move on to the second one. Our second big idea is that funders don't care about your needs, they care about the community need. And your goal is going to be able to show them that your organization is an invaluable partner in addressing what they do care about. Much like grant readiness is more than just grant writing, looking for potential funders isn't just trying to decide which grants to apply for. It's trying to find and identify, develop relationships with funders who want to solve the same community problem that you do. So what we're going to cover next is trying to decide what do funders actually want from you, and then dive further into private and public funding sources. So what do funders want? Whether they're a foundation, a corporation, or a government entity, they all want to fund community change. And they do this through alignment at the mission and the program levels. So when you're applying for funding, you need to be able to show that funder that you have that they can clearly see that the work you're doing is a part of their own mission and that of the specific funding opportunity. So, for example, let's say the funder is interested in improving community health and wellness, but the current funding opportunity is limited to children's health. Your program providing direct health services for homebound senior citizens is not going to be a good fit. You have mission alignment, but you don't have program alignment, so you wouldn't want to waste your time or theirs going after that particular funding opportunity. Secondly, you've got a program that's ready to go with little to no ramp up time, so you can make the most of the performance period. You're going to offer a cost-effective solution that includes a well-planned program with a detailed and realistic budget, strong management systems, and outcomes that move the needle on a pressing community issue. And because you have the experience to do what you plan, you can help them advance their long-term goals. And you know that rarely does one grant award solve the problem. So you're always looking to the future, and you're planning your work to last beyond the grant award, identifying additional funding partners and offering a program that could even be expanded or replicated in other areas. Overall, you're offering them a solution in community change. Now let's talk about the two main sources of grant funding, private and public. Proposal details and complexity are going to vary by which source you're going after, and the types you choose to pursue should be based upon your organization's strategic direction. Private funding includes support from corporations and foundations. First, let me clarify that although I use the term corporation, I'm also referring to businesses of all sizes. Many corporations have company-sponsored foundation or philanthropic arms with local or national giving programs. Some only give to nonprofits. Overall, they support causes that are linked to the company's mission and interest. In exchange for their support, they're looking for return on investment and visibility in the community as a good corporate partner. Corporate giving occurs in several ways. Depending upon the business, you may be able to receive multiple kinds of support. First of all, grants. You apply and they cut the check. Second, sponsorships. You ask them to underwrite a cost associated with an event or another need. And then you can also look at the opportunity for in-kind resources. And these are donations that are often a good ask for local companies because it's an easier way for them to give things like products, donation of meeting space, professional expertise, and hands-on volunteer support. In fact, many corporations also have matching gift programs that match their employee volunteer time with financial donations. Foundations are another source of private grant support. They're interested in alignment, outcomes, and innovative services. And there are two main types of foundations offering grants and often scholarships. Private foundations are created and maintained through income from individuals, families, or groups of individuals. Their funding priorities are usually based on their own personal interest. This type of foundation may offer funding at local, state, and national levels. Community foundations, on the other hand, provide grants within a specific community or region. And so they're really invested in the support and growth of their own communities. They may focus on one community issue or several. Nonprofits are the typical beneficiaries of community foundation funding, but some also give to government agencies and educational institutions. Remember that if you're a new or a small organization, a community foundation is often a good first step into grants. Here's some ideas for where to begin your search for private funding support. This is not an all-inclusive list. You may want to obtain a paid subscription to a grant database, but there are also free options available to help with your research. You can go and Google grant database, and there are several vendors that will have a promo where you can get 2 weeks for free to do a trial and check it out and see if it's a good opportunity for your organization. The Candid Funding Information Network is another opportunity that will connect you with local partner sites to access the Foundation directory online for free. And GrantMakers.io allows you to use filters to search for who's giving to organizations in your area. If you're looking for foundation support, you can also go to individual foundations' websites and sign up for their newsletters or any trainings that they're offering. That'll give you a great opportunity to get to know their staff and be on their announcement list for any upcoming funding opportunities. All right, let's talk about the reality of working with public government funding. They're created through tax dollars to benefit the common good. They're available at all levels of government, from city all the way up to the feds. They create growth and scale, usually with bigger award sizes than what you're going to get through foundations and corporations, including multi-year commitments that can allow you to address large-scale systemic community problems. Pre-registration is required in online portals, and we'll talk about that more in just a minute. Applications are much longer. This could be 40, 50, even 60 pages, not counting all the exhibits and forms that you'll need to download and complete as part of your application. You won't be able to get general operating support from public government sources. Their awards are restricted and require extensive reporting. So you can't use government grants for general operating expenses that you might otherwise be able to use to help pay your electric bill or the rent on your facility for next month. Government grants pay through a reimbursement model. So in this case, you do the work and then you request payment, typically on a monthly or a quarterly basis. So you're going to need at least 90 days of operating capital to give you some relief if your government funding partner is delayed in reimbursing you. So overall, public government funding involves lots of red tape through high levels of compliance in internal controls, monitoring, and reporting. But it does have the benefit of allowing you to grow and perhaps get some multi-year awards. So it's something to think about if you decide to go after government funds. All right. So if you want to work with federal funds through grants and contracts, your organization must be pre-registered in some free portals. SAM.gov is the system for award management, and it can take several weeks for your registration to be processed. So you can't just decide tomorrow you're going to apply for a federal award. You're probably not going to have time to get everything done before the deadline. Once your organization is registered, you're going to get something called a UEI, a unique entity identifier, that's part of every application after that point. With SAM.gov, you're also going to have to renew your registration on an annual basis to make sure everything is up to date. Login.gov will provide a secure sign-in service to access multiple government platforms, and it's really great to have just that one email to access several systems. And then third, grants.gov is a free, centralized government portal where you can search and apply for federal level grants. This site also includes educational resources on how to use the portal to work on your application and submit it, and links to all of the federal grant-making agencies so you can learn more about their national priorities and current opportunities. So you might be thinking, I'm not interested in federal grants right now. Why should I register? Some state agencies, like Texas Health and Human Services, require that you have a unique entity identifier to apply for our grants. So you would have to go ahead and get that SAM.gov account. All right, there are several ways to find public funding resources. So I've given you some more ideas here in this table. At the federal level, you can check out the Federal Register, or grants.gov. At the state level, there's more variation. You're probably going to need to bookmark different agency websites and sign up for their announcements if they have a listserv. Texas Smart Buy, the electronic state business daily search, is where some state agencies include their grant opportunities and other procurement solicitations. Texas Health and Human Services doesn't have a listserv. So you would need to bookmark our site and then check back for new opportunities. On our grants page, you can also view past application packets and see which entities were selected as awardees. There are also more than 150 Texas state agencies, so you can go to texas.gov and scroll through the list and decide which ones are going to be good funding opportunities for your organization. Now, at the local level, which is city and county government, there's also a lot of variation. So the best way is typically to go to your city or your county site and try to find the purchasing or procurement page to get you to the right opportunities. Two other helpful websites you may want to check out include the Uniform Guidance, the 2 CFR 200. This is the rule book of generally applicable requirements that cut across government programs and provide a uniformity of requirements for anyone that's going to be working with federal awards. And finally, you can go to the USA Spending website to see who's been awarded funding by the different federal grant-making agencies. Proposal terminology. Whatever the funder calls it, the application packet is going to fully explain the purpose of that grant funding and give you all the information you need to develop and submit a competitive proposal. The application packet is a planning tool for you that's going to help you decide pretty quickly if you should go for it or give it a pass. Now, at the federal level, you'll usually see the term Notice of Funding Opportunity, NOFO, but both private and public funders also use the terms Request for Application, RFA, or Request for Proposal, RFP. At Texas Health and Human Services, we use the RFA term. So there are some typical components that you want to look for in your next NOFO, RFP, or RFA, whether it's a public or a private funder. So in general, you want to look for the overview, which includes the goals and the objectives of the opportunity, the number of awards, the award floor and ceiling, and any cost sharing or matching requirements. Secondly, the eligibility section includes whether you're even qualified to apply in terms of organization type, your geographic service area, and anything that is specific to that funding opportunity that they list in the NOFO. Then next, you want to look for application and submission information. And this is going to require you to read that NOFO from the first page to the last page, looking for things like a submission checklist, forms and exhibits you'll need to download, how you submit your proposal, whether it's by mail, in person, or by email, dates for any pre-application webinars, and the submission deadline. Then you want to look at the review and selection process. And this is going to include how the funder is going to score and rank applications and select who wins an award. And then if you're always thinking about success, right? So you want to look at the award administration section. And this is going to tell you when and how the funder is going to communicate grant award notifications, when the performance period will begin and end, the reimbursement model, and all of the reporting obligations, all of that red tape that goes along with the money. Overall, when you're reading a NOFO, you're going to be deciding not only if you're eligible to apply, but that you've got time to prepare and submit a competitive application. Specifically, that you have the financial and grant management systems in place to comply with all of the monitoring and reporting requirements. So now let's take these components and take a look at an opportunity that the CDC recently posted on grants.gov, the Drug-Free Communities Support Program for new grantees in the first year of a 5-year opportunity, and look for those key components. And even if you're not all that interested in public funding right now, if you can learn to read a federal level NOFO, you're going to have no problem with any foundation or corporate opportunity. So let's take a look. Starting with the overview, the purpose of this RFA is to support community coalitions that work to prevent and reduce substance abuse among youth. This opportunity fits the CDC's national priorities of protecting Americans from infectious and chronic disease, strengthening public health systems, and advancing innovation in health data and infrastructure. Not all federal level grants are for large amounts. You can see that in this one, they're going to provide up to 50 awards of $125,000 for that first 1 year budget period. So you might look at that right off the bat and say, I'm not sure if that's enough money for us, but maybe it is. So you want to keep reading further. April 14th was the application deadline, with award notifications scheduled for the end of August, and then 1 month later, they were expecting the start date for all program activities. So remember when we talked about having a program that's ready to go? This is an example of where you'll need to hit the ground running after you're told you've been selected for a government award. Consider the timing of the notice of award and the program start date. Are these dates going to fit in with your program's current timeline and need for funding? Now, when I did my review, I downloaded a copy of the entire application packet, which was 71 pages, and read it from front to back. And I had lots of highlights and tape flags covering all of the key proposal components. So let's move on to eligibility, that second component. To decide if your organization is an eligible entity, you want to look for the organization type, geographic service area, and any other requirements that you have to meet at a baseline level to apply for this application. In this case, they're looking for 501c3 nonprofit community-based coalitions throughout the U.S. that address youth substance abuse. They are looking for established coalitions. So this is an opportunity to create a new one. You must have experience. You can't be a previous drug-free community grantee. You can apply on your own or with a fiscal agent. And that's an external organization that's eligible to receive federal funds. And they provide a long list of those agents, including various government entities, all the way to small business partners. There are also some additional statutory eligibility requirements that are specific to this opportunity. And they include things like representatives who've worked together on substance abuse for at least 6 months, and an ability to secure a 100% match from non-federal sources. So they'll be providing $125,000, but you have to find another $125,000 from another source or sources to be able to match that. So that might be a sticking point for your organization. They also require that your collaboration include representatives from 12 required sectors. So right away, if your cross-sector collaboration doesn't include representation from all 12 sectors, then you're likely not going to be able to submit a competitive application. But if you do check all of these eligibility boxes, then you can move on to reading about how to apply and submit your application. So as you're reading this section, first consider if you'll have enough time to pull together the documentation and submit an application by the deadline. Now, they do provide a submission checklist that includes things that I think you'll find familiar if you set up your grant content library. They want a 1-page project abstract, or kind of a quick executive summary of your project, a 20-page project narrative, which includes a logic model, identification of your target population, your work plan, data monitoring and evaluation plans, your organizational capacity statement, key personnel, a description of the community coalition, a budget with a budget narrative, and several attachments and forms. The application checklist also breaks down the project narrative by evaluation criteria and how many points you can earn per section, for a total of 100 points. For example, the organizational capacity section can net you up to a quarter of the 100 total points, so you can see that history and expertise are important. The reviewers will also evaluate the extent to which your organization has the capacity to manage the programmatic and fiscal requirements of the grant, including the the roles and responsibilities of the key personnel, recruitment and retention of coalition members, and how those 12 sector representatives are going to be involved in achieving the coalition's goals. And then they tell you that all of your applications are to be submitted online through grants.gov, or if you're unable to use the portal, you have to get pre-approval to send in your application by email. This packet also details 3 levels of review. The initial review is where they confirm that just basically you meet all of those eligibility requirements, that you submitted your application on time, and that your project is clearly aligned with those 3 national CDC priorities that was listed in the overview. If you've met those ground floor requirements, then you're moved on to the merit review. And this is where they review your application packet for completeness and use that 100-point system that we just covered on the previous slide. Now remember, funders take compliance seriously and look for low-risk awardees. If you've made it to the risk review stage, that's where they want to consider your experience working successfully with federal level awards. They're going to check your track record with a SAM.gov responsibility and qualification history check to make sure there are no exclusions, proceedings, or other negative findings against your organization. And finally, the grant reviewers are going to rank all of the applications that made it through the review levels by average score, choosing up to 50 awardees and notifying everyone of whether they were selected or not. And then we get to award administration, because winning the award is just another step in the process of successfully managing grant funding. Once you get the award is when the real work actually begins. So you want to take a look at any reporting obligations to determine if you have those internal systems to carry out the work, and if there's anything that's going to be cost prohibitive for your organization down the line. You know, compare the amount of work you're going to have to do for this budget of $125,000 per year. So the CDC is going to email the notice of award to the 50 awardees, and they include in the application packet a URL that takes you to a sample of a CDC notice award, so you have some time to take a look at that and understand how to read it before yours gets to you by email. The requirements for managing this award also include a lot of monitoring through communication with the CDC and some in-person site visits. And overall, this opportunity is for a 5-year period. Annually, there's a yearly progress report, a data management plan, and a federal financial report. In years 2 and 4, you'll provide data on core performance measures. In year 3, your sustainability plan. And then your final performance report and final financial report is due 120 days after the end of that 5-year project period. Then they also have some training requirements, and you're required to participate in a virtual training for new recipients within the first 90 days of your award. And then you have to attend and complete a comprehensive National Coalition Institution training program to work with their staff on a community assessment, logic model, strategic and action plan, evaluation plan, and a sustainability plan. So overall, it sounds like they're really invested in their awardees being successful and continuing to keep their efforts going beyond the 5-year grant period. So that's definitely a plus. Okay, I know that was a lot, but I hope that it's helped you to learn more about what to look for when reading your next NOFO. Let's move on to the last part of today's webinar. So here's our last big idea: practice creates confidence. And it wouldn't be a grants workshop without some best practices to follow all the grant readiness planning. So the DSHS Grant Development Center is a free public resource for any organization in Texas that's interested in learning more about grants. You're welcome to share this with coworkers or any community partners that would find our services of interest. We provide a large amount of information about writing all the typical sections of a grant proposal on our Grant Writing 101 page, best practices, and training opportunities on our grant education resources page, and access to DSHS health data sets through our data resources page. You can also sign up for our bi-monthly emails, typically second and fourth Wednesdays, on the yellow subscribe button on all of our pages. And with the bulletins, you're getting ongoing education, upcoming trainings and events, and private and public funding opportunity listings. And I'll have that QR code at the end of the webinar also. So an essential part of planning for grant support is understanding your story. So I want you to think about these three questions. How many people did you serve last year? How have their lives changed? And why does your program get better results than other local programs? So with those three questions, which one is the easiest for you to answer? Which one is the hardest? You must know the answers to these questions to be successful with grants. Your answers show that you understand your target population, that you have a way to at least track some output data. You know what success looks like, those changes that your program recipients are going to have in knowledge or behavior, and that you know how your program provides an important and unduplicated service in your community. Remember how funders don't care about your needs, they care about the community need? Data is also an important part of telling a compelling story of community need. It addresses why your solution is important and it creates urgency. So when you're thinking about what data to include in your statement of need in your application, you want to make sure you're choosing trusted sources. Absolutely use your own data from your organization to demonstrate the level of local need and your experience in working with the target population. Quantitative data is even stronger when you pair it with stories about the people receiving your services to personalize that need. Be sure to choose data that's as recent as possible, preferably less than 5 years old, and that is directly relevant to the community problem that you're addressing. And always provide citations for your data and tie those back to the funder's stated priorities. And as promised, here's some grants best practices. Read that NOFO thoroughly. Read it twice or 3 times if you need to make sure that you're going to be able to follow the rules. Use their templates and provide all the information in the required order and the format provided. Don't let some little ticky-tack thing end up with your application getting thrown out on a technicality. Look for compliance issues and reporting and monitoring that could create problems for your organization down the line. And really thoughtfully consider that submission deadline and don't apply if you're not going to be competitive. Take advantage of pre-submission opportunities, and this could be an application webinar, an email, or a phone call to the point of contact for questions. It might be a letter of intent, a concept paper, or any other technical assistance that's going to allow you to better judge whether or not this is going to be a good opportunity for you. Build in extra time, because these things always take more time than you think. For a corporate or a foundation grant, it might take you just a couple of hours, all the way up to a federal grant that could take 100 or more hours. Identify what you need from others and give them deadlines. Plan for the time that's required for your own organization's internal sign-off procedure. Register in any required portals like Grants.gov and SAM.gov if you haven't already done so. And gather all of the documents, especially attachments and partner agreements. Don't wait until the last minute for those. Plan time for fresh eyes to edit that final application and have someone also do a mock review. And that's where you take your application and then you compare it to the submission checklist and to the evaluation criteria or the scoring rubric to make sure that you have answered all of the questions thoroughly. And then do your best to submit the application a few days ahead of time, just in case there are any technical or other issues. Write for your audience. Grant reviewers are people too, and they're people who are going to be possibly looking at hundreds of applications. So you can't assume that the reviewers have familiarity with your organization or your geographic area. You want to be brief and clear, use jargon-free language, try to reduce the use of acronyms wherever you can. You want someone to be able to read your application through just one time and understand what you're talking about. And if you have multiple people who are writing different sections of the application, go back and stitch those all together in one voice so it sounds cohesive. You're probably focusing so much time on the story that you're telling in your proposal that you neglect your public face. So you want to make sure that you've updated your website and your social media messaging to tell the same story that you're sharing with potential funders. Keep track of all those grant decisions, whether you apply or not. If you do apply, then you can track the award notification date as you're waiting to see if you were successful or not. And if you decide not to apply, you can note why not. So you can save time in the future and be able to respond if your leadership asks you why you didn't pursue it. And finally, we were told this when we were kids, if you don't at first succeed, try again. No one wins every grant they go after. I don't care how long you've been in the business, you're still going to lose some. And when you're not funded, you should use it as a learning experience. Contact the funder, if it's allowed, and ask for your scoring or any feedback they can give to perhaps do better next time. So you want to keep trying and keep learning so each application is going to be better than the last one. So today we covered 3 main ideas. That strong systems are more important than good writing, and what really drives grant success are the decisions that you make before you even begin reading your next RFP. Funders don't care about your needs, they care about the community need, and it's up to you to speak their language. Demonstrate how your organization is the best investment in community change. And finally, practice creates confidence. You don't have to be an expert to be successful with grants. Be committed to continuing to learning, growing, and doing great work in your community. Thank you for joining me today. Please explore the DSHS Grant Development Center's web pages to continue learning more about grants. You're also welcome to contact me with any questions at my email address here on the slide. Thank you and have a wonderful day.